Yeah.
So can you explain a little bit about why is this volume Prolegomena and what is the purpose of kind of tackling that broadly first?
Yeah. So Prolegomena is really, just going back to like what is Prolegomena?
Yeah, I guess
That's
define it first
yeah. I
for the
mean,
people that don't know.
that's
That'd be
like the
good.
first things of theology, right? The questions of what is theology? What is the purpose of theology? How do we do theology? How do we categorize theology? So Prolegomena develops in the 17th century, and you see kind of the beginnings of it in someone like Johann Gerhard and his theological commonplaces. But even so, he doesn't spend a ton of time on Prolegomena, but he does have a section on it. And what you see is Prolegomena expanding more and more toward the end of that era, especially. And Franciscus Junius, who is a Reformed author, he has a treatise on true theology. That really is kind of the key turning point in the scholastic era, both for the Reformed and Lutheran thinkers. And Lutherans draw on some of the distinctions that he makes there as well. And I think it's a really helpful development in theology because you really can't do theology well, and this is true of any discipline, but you can't do any discipline well without defining what that's about. Like, what is this discipline? What's the purpose of this discipline? What are the basic assumptions we're taking to this discipline as we write about it? And I think this is something that's just desperately missing from the dialogue that's going on in our culture right now on almost any issue. Is people tend to just make arguments without examining the base assumptions that they're bringing to the argument. And when you have two parties coming together and arguing over an issue, and they're both coming with very different basic assumptions, they're speaking past each other, and there's going to be no productive conversation. So this is true in theology just as it is in anything else, is let's go back to the basics and say, what are we assuming when we're talking? So I thought that's very, very important in a lot of these theological discussions that we're having. And when we do things like debate, some of the things that are debated within Lutheranism, and this is true not just of the Lutheran tradition, but this is obviously where I'm coming from. So within the Lutheran tradition, we have debates about, say, sanctification, right? Or we have debates about the third use of the law. We have debates about the relationship between law and gospel. Now, people with very different foundational assumptions come to those, fighting about specifically just, say, sanctification, but haven't really kind of stepped back and said, okay, let's kind of start before this and say, how is it that we approach God? How do we approach God's relationship to his law? How do we approach what it means to be a human person? These kind of basic fundamental questions really need to be asked first before we can get into the specific doctrinal debates.
Yeah,